I am here with Raven, who has been working with plant medicines and other medicines for 30 years and is going to help us understand everything about mushrooms, about psilocybin, where it comes from, who uses it, what is it used for, what kind of experience people have, what benefits does it give you, what does tradition say, what does science say. So there's a growing awareness. More people are hearing about the benefits of psilocybin. There's clinical studies that show benefits on depression, on just the feeling of fulfillment and happiness. It changes people's lives. Many people saw it on the Goop Lab, where not only a group goes to South America somewhere and has a ceremony with tea and some people have strong realizations. It's all over the news, right? Helps with PTSD and with many other conditions. But do we really need clinical studies to know about the benefits of psilocybin? Because we have used it before we even knew what clinical studies were. Before any clinical study was ever made, right? Humans knew about the benefits of psilocybin. So that's a little bit what I want to talk about today, because more and more people are asking about it, and instead of going to the experts that study these things in a clinical setting, right? And that's great, because some people need the reassurance that scientifically this is sound and proven and not dangerous, and also to get an idea for the people that are not going to do it in the ceremonial way, in the ancient way, to get an idea of how to keep a regimen, right? How many milligrams to take, how often, and that kind of thing. Because there's microdosing and there's macrodosing. And we'll go into all of this in a minute. So my first question to you is psilocybin. Some people call it psilocybin, some people call it magic mushrooms. What is the correct name?
So psilocybin refers to the genus of all the fruiting bodies of a mycelial network that actually create a compound called psilocybin or psilocin. There's two, and they're usually entourage in the mushroom together to create what we experience as the magical journey. And the part that opens up is the fruiting body of a much larger network that is pretty much underneath every inch of dirt around the planet. The primary reason that they exist in nature is to help decompose life and help translate that life into a next state where it becomes food or fuel or cleanse different kinds of agents that can move across and nourish the rest of life on Earth.
Transformation is energy. Nothing is lost, everything is transformed.
Yep.
This is an agent of transformation.
Yeah, and in that, in our ancestral view, which we call them tetanonakats, which is literally translated into, some people say, flesh of Creator, or the body of Creator, or little God people. So these mushrooms that we're eating, for us and our ancestors in the traditional way, is not just a consciousness aid or a tool or a beneficial help in communicating with your body and with your environment, but rather it's a relationship that in some ways it's a sacrament, that the fruit of the Mother Earth's information network is that body. It's the fruiting body, so we get to eat that. And I think it's amazing that it is coming back in this point in time, both in the medical kind of clinical side and also in the
spiritual.
The spiritual side, that's somewhere bordering between recreational and spiritual right now, and there's a lot to talk about it there.
Yeah. And how long have we human beings been using this kind of mushrooms, and where does this habit or custom originate from?
Well, there's documents or there's evidence of the use going as far back as 10,000 years. Like the closer we get to now, there's more there's a lot of documentation in the Mesoamerican peoples, my ancestors, the Mexica, the Maya. We used the mushroom regularly, and there's lots of signs of that. There's written in the codexes, there's structures, there's entire kind of a history on it, and that's the tradition that I carry, is holding this lineage of how to use it in the way and how to work with it and build the relationship we did in the way. And then you go further back, and you go the ancient Greeks with the Eleusinian mysteries. They used some form of mushroom or ergot fungus. It's kind of they're not sure which, but mushrooms were definitely prevalent. The Siberian peoples were known to use the Amanita muscara, which is where the word shaman comes from, that most people don't know. The shamanus comes from, like, a real shaman actually went into death states with the Amanita muscara, because it can kill you. It has a toxicity level, unlike the more common psilocybin mushrooms. And so oftentimes the shaman would put himself in a dangerous death place. And actually what would happen is the people who wanted to experience the mushrooms with them would drink his urine, because the active compounds were in there. And he would go into the death place. And when you go into the death place, you bring back information, and that's what a shaman actually is and does. So that's going pretty far back. And then cave paintings in Australia and different parts of Europe, going back 4,000 years. The Australian ones are 10,000 years. So it's been around a while. We don't know exactly how far back.
And what has it been around for? Because if these people were using it all those centuries ago, what were they using it for?
Well, I'm gonna go a little bit into a very popular theory put forth by Terence McKenna, which he calls the stoned ape hypothesis, in which, in fact, that there could have been, over the last 2 million years, times when we were hunter-gatherer people and we're following animals through vast regions of space, and we can only follow and track these animals. And of course, a lot of the psilocybin, it's
growing poop.
They're called dung-loving psilocybin. So if you can imagine us as a primitive people, maybe pre-language, pre-tool making, chasing these animals down, and not maybe across the savanna of not much vegetation, and we find these little fruiting bodies, and we start eating them, and we start experiencing what we now know clinically are really incredible. The binding site in our brain, it bonds to the serotonin 5-2A receptor site, which is where our serotonin binds to, and it fits it's like it matches the molecule. And it triggers a flood of information to the brain, higher levels of thinking, synesthesia, more advanced and more complex systems override the default mode network in the brain. So if our ancient ancestors were running around and that's all they had for food and consuming large amounts of these, it's very possible that language first initiated through it, that higher metacognition and the first large form awareness could have happened.
So it may be that the mushrooms were the catalyst of evolution.
Yes, it's very possible, and this is all conjecture. This is a hypothesis, and would be very difficult to prove. When you experience the medicine in its full capacity, when you do what I would say is a traditional medicine ceremony, you can see and understand that not from a mental place, but from a deeply cellular memory or recognition that this medicine, and there's a reason our ancestors called it the fruit of the gods, or the flesh of creator, or little god people, that there's a message and there's information and there is a substantial gift cultivated in the fruit of what they're carrying. And so I think ancient cultures all the way through understood this. Why does a unique creature in nature have a chemical that it produces that is uniquely similar to one of the most important neurochemicals in our human experience, serotonin? Why do we have a receptor site for it? There's a relationship in our evolutionary biology, I think, that these are meant to unlock very specific dormant tendencies.
The first time I took psilocybin mushrooms was in Palm Springs. I had a weekend off from my cardiology practice, which was gruesome, and there was a couple of friends there staying in my compound, and they had mushrooms, and I had never even heard of it.
Really? So you didn't have much psychedelic experience at that point? Like you're,
I had zero psychedelic experience.
So you kind of the 60s skipped over you. The 70s.
Yeah. I tried marijuana late. I tried everything late, and I never did it for, that time I did it for curiosity, right? So what happened to me that day?
Wait, let me ask you a question. So you grew up in Uruguay.
Yeah.
So was there the cultural and social stigma of these medicines, of drugs and LSD and mushrooms as a kind of like, no, you don't?
There still is, even though Uruguay was the first country that legalized marijuana.
Interesting.
Right, because we had a very progressive president at that time.
Right, I remember.
Who was a revolutionary in more than one way.
Yeah, he was.
But yeah, there was a stigma to all of these things. There still is, right? Even when it's legal. What happened to me that day was, I took it. I remember clearly the taste was disgusting, and then time started to warp. And at one moment I didn't feel really well, so I went and I lay down in my bed, and time stopped. And that was the moment that I had a personal flesh experience of what I loved to read about, quantum physics and how time is relative, and you know that already, because when you're having fun and you're present, time speeds, but then at other times you feel it as it's longer, and sometimes you enter in such a state that time doesn't exist, right? But this time I was laying in my bed and time stopped, and it was eternity, in which I was having all kinds of ideations, images, things that were very informative. And then suddenly a bird chirped, and it was as if that bird was inside my brain. And it couldn't be too close, because there were not too many trees. There were palm trees in the garden, but so I knew it was far away, but yet I was listening to it like in 6D.
Right.
It was amazing. That experience really set me out on a path of trying to understand this relativity of time and state, and how time varies depending on the state that you're in, more than if you're having fun or you're bored. It's levels of being. So that was my in-flesh introduction to levels of being, and start getting curious about it, right?
And I think that answers your question, because that experience, that kind of experience, before you experience it, it seems kind of novel. Like what would that really do? What is experiencing time really do? What is experiencing larger dimensions of space? And yet, especially now, there's so much data, and we're doing PET scans and fMRIs, and we can look at the brain, look at what the brain does. A lot of neurologists and neuroscientists are getting together and saying, we actually experience less than 1% of the information system available that we know of. That we know of what information is coming across in the cosmos naturally. we have the organ systems and we have the capacity to experience less than 1% of that. So when you eat something like this, it expands that, it pushes that 1%. How does that become valuable? And in all forms, you feel relationships and your potential to the work that you do, understanding the human body, understanding larger systems as that narrow bandwidth explodes.
Yeah, you start making connections. You start realizing that the, you know, what the Hindu poets say sometimes, which sounds beautiful, but it's a reality. For example, the Hindu poets in the sutras described reality as, now it exists, now it doesn't exist. Now it exists, now it doesn't exist. And nobody really understood it more than as a poetic thing until quantum physics, studying what the atom was made of,
doing, right.
Suddenly they, depending on the instruments they were measuring it with, the particles were there and not there.
Yeah.
And so reality is actually creating and disappearing all the time.
Yeah,
at such a big speed.
It's like 14 billion hertz.
That we don't see it. It's like
it's a really high rate.
Yeah, a really high rate, right?
Yeah.
But somehow, taking psilocybin lets you tap into some of that, you know, of understanding. For example, I remember the walls were moving, everything was alive. There wasn't more, oh, this is dead, and the chair is dead, and the walls are dead, and I'm alive. Everything was alive, and I started seeing the vibration, the life vibration on everything, right? And if you think about it, metal, wood, plastic,
all of it
is actually
it's
just
alive.
Energy.
Yeah.
And for some reason it's maintaining this shape, right? Yeah, you put it in this shape with a mold, whatever, but it's still in this shape.
And it's holding it.
And it's holding it.
And that takes energy.
So that not only energy, it takes intelligence. Right? So the mushrooms allowed me to tap into at least asking these questions, right?
So what you experienced there too was what we call animism, which is when you come to a ceremony and you hear the elders speak and you hear the community speak when they pick up a rock to put it in the let's say the sweat lodge fire. You don't say it's not a rock, it's a grandfather, it's a grandmother, and everything is regarded with respect. And I didn't get this either when I was young, because I grew up Western culture, even though I have native traditions. And as I came to them, putting the brain together and understanding that everything is alive, everything, and it gives us a different perspective on what we call unnatural, right? Because it is, because it's man-made, doesn't make it unnatural. It's just another aspect of consciousness. And I think as we start to approach these medicines with reverence and respect, we start to remember that connection that we have to all things, and then we can start to treat things differently with more respect and care for things longer, and actually bring the idea of what would an actual materialist culture be like, one in which, like the true materialist cultures, I think throughout history, if you look at all the climax cultures, what did they know how to do? They knew how to dress, they knew how to make beautiful tools and elegant sculpt, and everything was an act of reverence. And I think we've lost that. You know, we've kind of forgotten that everything
with
is
mass production.
And like I don't have to fix that. I can just buy it again.
Yeah.
And that leads to the degradation of our planet. And that's what this medicine is trying to get us to stop doing.
Yeah. And for those that need scientific proof, right? What they need to understand is that yes, there is scientific proof. Okay, maybe blood pressure goes down, depression goes down, and depression in reality is not that measurable, right? Because it's a subjective.
It's very subjective.
It's very subjective, but it is studied, right? But the experience of taking these things is a more spiritual experience, right? So here is where spirit and science undeniably cross, right? Because these improvements in mood, in level of happiness, in vitality, really are a consequence of a spiritual experience.
Yeah, and if you spend any time watching the videos and reading the papers and doing a little bit of data research, you'll see that I think John Hopkins University, in their clinical studies and in their reports over the last 20 years, and Paul Stamets are probably two of the most important figureheads in terms of giving us that insight into, hey, this isn't just a strange, isolated, weird experience that you go into a village in Mexico and have with a shaman. Is that it is something that is integratable to our daily lives. And that's what the work of Paul Stamets shows us, and the work of John Hopkins is showing us, that clinically and measurably there are things that are offered by this medicine in a way that we are still trying to understand. Like cognitively, we don't get it. You talk to a medicine person, like, yeah, of course, it's been happening for thousands of years. It's a tradition. And that's where I think my wish would be for people to be able to experience in that traditional setting. It's wonderful to be on a couch and blindfolded and have somebody holding your hand in a very clinical, observed, like, make sure you're okay setting. Something very different happens when you are in an elemental ceremony in which the medicine itself has been cultivated and grown with that idea, that specific lineage and history. The medicine becomes much more powerful and much more activated, and it works in a very different way.
So, mushrooms are taken in macrodoses
Mm-hmm.
and in microdoses. In macrodoses, they give you the hallucinogenic experience, and we're going to talk about that term in a minute, right? But the microdosing does not. You actually don't really notice because it's subtle, right? I've been microdosing for some time. I don't even notice it.
Mm.
But eventually, it kind of sets in that edges are softened.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between macrodosing and microdosing in the way that you understand it?
Well, in its basic function, it's whether you're taking a little bit or a lot, right? The micro, small, and macro, large. The microdose also, what it does is it introduces people who have never experienced, let's say, medicine before, have never been in a traditional ceremony, have never, done any of this weird stuff, and it might be very opposed to it. It introduces it in a very mild and a very gentle format in which you can take a microdose of mushrooms and experience maybe a cognitive clarity, an emotional lightness. Your body can shift slightly towards the directions of its own kind of innate healing, because of when you're taking a small amount, again, it's a serotonin agonist, so it'll actually kind of increase your body's ability to work with your natural serotonin levels. This is why it has such a great effect on depression. And then it triggers other parts of the brain.
And contrary to the SSRIs,
right?
Who make your cells stop even further from producing anything,
Yep.
right? Because the body detects it as already there. These actually still allow your cells to produce their own serotonin. So it's not
throwing off the system.
the system.
What I've found with the mushrooms is they have, as in nature, this ability to enhance other life forms. When the mycelial network spreads through the earth, when they come across other root systems of plants, per se,
they benefit them.
They increase the ability to absorb nitrogen and phosphorus, and it becomes an exchange. And it also benefits the mushroom because the mushroom doesn't photosynthesize, so they need to get fed. So it's a collaborative thing that happens in the brain as well on a kind of metaphorical level. It goes into the neural garden, and it starts to do its same little magic. It forms connections in the synaptic environment and triggers different forms of thinking, different feelings, different ideas, different awarenesses. Ideas and concepts grow and shrink, which then enforce behaviors, which then enforce new behaviors, and maybe kind of decline what we call, the repetitive behaviors or the conditioning responses that we've grown up with our whole lives. They give us an opportunity to shift out of those. And when it's fed daily, along with changing, let's say, behavioral practices, as well as combining them with other mushrooms like, let's say, lion's mane and other reishi, cacao, blueberry, bacopa. These act in synergistic relationship and then increase the potential to create nerve growth factor in the hippocampus, which means you're making more neurons, which means you're having new behaviors, which, I mean, the experience that I've seen personally from people just doing the microdoses before they even come to a ceremony, people that are just regularly get on the microdoses, the letters that come, the realizations that come. Let's
go to those experiences in a minute, but first I want to ask you about this word, hallucinogenic, right? Because there is this common understanding that hallucinations are things that are not real, right? But when I had hallucinations on mushrooms, they were incredibly interesting, insightful, loving, sometimes scary, right? But they were so relevant to my life, and they led for me to understand certain things that shifted my attitude and my perception of things in a way that improved my life, because it decreased my anxiety and my emotional reactivity. It kind of reset it to a different, before it was fluctuating like that, now it fluctuates like that, right?
So,
and by the way, in opposition to SSRIs, that most people describe the experience of being on SSRIs, and I was, for a while, I tried them just to see what the experience is, and it's a monotonous experience.
Right.
So you don't fluctuate.
Right.
You don't feel. You don't have the differences between day and night.
Yeah.
Happiness and sadness. Yeah. So become like numb and sterile in a way, right? Going back to the word hallucination. So what are these things that we see, and who put them there, and how do they form? Why sometimes visual, sometimes auditory, sometimes gustatory, olfactory,
Well, this goes back to what I was talking about with that 1%. But before we go there, I think when they were named hallucinogens was specifically demarcating this. It was when they were started to be kind of demonized. The idea that this was creating an unsightly or unwelcome. They could create something that was dangerous, a hallucination that wasn't real. Whereas the word psychedelic was then used by the counterculture to describe them, and psychedelic basically means mind revealing. And the word that I actually prefer to talk about them commonly, outside of their ancestral traditional names, is entheogen. Entheogen literally translate into God revealing substance, or God inspiring substance, where it actually reveals what's actually going on, what our connection to creation. Psychedelic is mind revealing. Mind and God, to me, are synonymous. They're one aspect of creation in which we're all linked intrinsically. So what I think is happening, or what I know is happening in my very visceral experience, and also watching many, many people go through this and their experience afterwards, is that suddenly like everybody's stuck on Channel 4 on a television set from 1972. And that's all they think, that's reality, right? And then you go into somebody else's house and they have a brand new flat screen television with thousands of channels.
Color TV.
Color TV, yeah, it's like
Curve.
yeah, it's like wait a second, you start in 3D.
With 3D.
Right, and so we've all been stuck on channel 4
In black and white.
in back further 1952. And what happens is when you experience certain, and it's not just compounds in nature, but I know that's what we're talking about. These can be done through meditation, breath work, falling in love. Like there's many practices, cold, there's many things that open up our cellular and neurological capacity to experience a larger spectrum of existence, which we tend to leave to what we call the religious experience, or we tend to leave that to what we call the spiritual experience for other people. But really, it's the foundation of everything we do. So what's happening is not that we're hallucinating. Rather, we are looking into the larger experience of existence. We're only seeing 1%. Channel 4 on a TV from 1952. And these medicines and these experiences allow us to open up the larger spectrum of what we didn't know about reality. And that, when guided properly, put under the right circumstances, having all the elementals and especially if you get the historical lineage where we've been doing this, my people have been doing this for thousands of years. And if you have that kind of support, the potential for learning, for experience, for opening up, for receiving new information, for living life in a much more profound way becomes, it's just something we've never seen before.
What occurred to me is that just like our ancestors may have well evolved thanks to picking these little things from poop when they were following animals, right? That may have led to evolution of the human race. Maybe at this time in evolution, that's what is needed to go to the next step and get unstuck from this warmongering, hyper-consuming,
polarized political mess.
Technology and it's crazy. It's killing us, right?
I agree.
Maybe that's what's needed to go to the next level. So this, instead of Biden vaccinating everybody in mass, he should have psilocybin experience for everybody
for all.
In mass.
I highly recommend it. I think it would be a great...
Starting with Congress.
Yes, I would love to get the entire field of Congress and put them into a massive psilocybin experience.
So let me ask you something. How long have you been doing and guiding people with this medicine?
Myself, I have been working with this medicine for 30 years, at least, about that. Once I was initiated and started actually carrying the medicine as a curandero, which is kind of more what I call myself.
And the literal translation of curandero is healer.
Yeah, healer.
Curar is heal. Curandero is somebody that heals.
Somebody that heals.
Healer is somebody that heals.
Some people, you identify, people introduce me as shaman, and shaman is so specific to death states and sometimes going there, but I like to honor the tradition, the lineages of the people that have done shamanism, which is very few on planet Earth. There's very few cultures that actually practice death states. And so I like curandero and medicine carrier, because I carry this medicine and I create a container. Actually, a dear friend of ours, Jimmy, he said, you can no more trigger the illumination in a human being than you can force a caterpillar into becoming a butterfly. It's going to do it when it's time.
In its environment.
So what we can do...
the right conditions.
Right, the right conditions. So what you can do is build a beautiful garden with milkweed and all the different things that a butterfly may need. And that's really what a good medicine carrier does, is creates a space and an environment for the butterflies to come and self-transform, because a caterpillar does it on its own. It goes in and it vomits and it destroys itself and it creates a new being. And that's a lot of what happens in many medicine experiences. It's a disintegration or a breaking down of the old systems and old patterns in order for new systems to arise. And
Of all the people that you witnessed, what's the story, the testimonial that sticks with you the most?
There's a lot. I mean, there's pretty substantial ones. To witness someone who has been plagued with sadness, depression, suicide, suicidal thoughts, anxiety, nervousness, to watch somebody who just felt completely powerless of their life. This thing, I have no relationship to it. Give me a bunch of drugs so that I can just numb myself out. Because I don't want to kill myself, even though I do, but I don't actually want to do it because mom and dad will be sad and the whole story around it. To watch a person, I had a person come in who was very severely medicated and also doing a lot of alternative therapies and a lot of alternative work, and just really not getting anywhere with it. To watch him come do ceremony with me over the course of a 10-day workshop where we began with kambo, and then we ended with the sacred mushroom journey. And to watch him a few days later call upon the community to come watch him bury his meds and honor them, say, thank you, you got me here, I appreciate it, I don't need you anymore, and put them in the earth. And this is a guy who...
How long ago was that?
This was about 1.5 years ago.
And he's still fine?
He's doing great. And this was a guy who, if you shifted his meds a little bit, like when he would try to wean off or cut back, he would go into rages, depressive manic episodes. His chemistry would fly off the handle. So he was terrified.
After the ceremony, did he keep on doing microdosing?
I believe he did for a little while. I'm not fully sure. That's a really good question. I think he might have stopped.
But it is a common thing that people do a ceremony and then microdose for a while, or microdose for a while and then do a ceremony.
I highly recommend it.
You can combine these approaches and complement these approaches.
I highly recommend it in both directions, before and after.
Yeah.
Look, it's helping us produce neurons in the brain. We make 700 new neurons a day. We lose about 100,000 a day. These are bad numbers.
So where do people get psilocybin for microdosing?
Well, here's where we get into the next phase of where we're going as a culture, as a society, as a species. The problem that I find, not only with the microdosing, but the macrodosing and doing these ceremonies, is that it is very difficult to find someone who is trustworthy, someone who has cultivated these in a loving environment, someone who has done these where it's regulated and they're carefully taken care of. Up until now, mushrooms has been a street drug. And you have the street hippie kind of selling little baggies of mushrooms. And this comes with a lot of problems. It comes with potency, the age, whether they've been cross-contaminated. There's very little regulation when you buy a bag of mushrooms on the street.
So what should people do? Find a doctor that's doing this in clinical studies?
Well, there are more and more people who are putting themselves at great personal risk to create established and structured kind of repeatable formulas and capsules for clients and patients. There are clinicians that are helping people administer, themselves administering and helping people go through, even though it's still illegal and it's a federal crime.
And there are medicine men.
And there are medicine men, and there are traditional healers. Yeah.
And you have a Rolodex of medicine men.
I have a Rolodex of two 2 names. There's a very short list of people that I trust to.
So people could look in in my bio
Yep.
and find your contact information.
Find the information of how to meet with people that have not only been cultivating, but have been holding the medicine in ceremony and holding it in tradition and holding it in respect and caring for and cultivating them in the way they should be, the way that it's best for them to be. I personally,
then guiding you through it.
And then guiding you through it. And I personally, my own view on synthesis and extraction and isolation. So synthesis of there's chemically synthesized psilocybin, and then isolation of the specific compound in which you can just get it clinically in a little pill or a lozenge, this extraction process. I don't feel that is beneficial in the overall longevity of the use of these, the working with these medicines, because it takes us back to that whole thing that we're talking about, consumerism and plastic. Give me the thing, I want it easy. I don't want to go through building a relationship with it. I just want the experience. I want to go into the clinic. I want to get back to my life. I want to be happy. It's a road.
Even ancient medicines treated like that don't deliver their full promise.
They don't. And there's an intelligence in there. And you'll experience it when you experience them correctly. When you experience the intelligence. I've had a lot of people do medicine ceremonies with other medicine carriers, other curanderos, other people who just are what there's a common word now, they're called sitters. People who just feel called to just sit. And then people who have learned in the clinical practice, psychologists and psychiatrists. I've had lots of people who have done it in those environments. And then they come to a ceremony in which the fire is lit and the elements and the altars and everything's acknowledged and the medicine's been cared for and carried to hundreds of medicine ceremonies. And they say it's nothing like that. Although that experience was wonderful, that this experience is the true nature of the capacity of what it is. And there is something very beautiful in that. So I highly recommend finding a relationship with it and learning. I know people that are cultivating them now. They're like, okay, so you know what? I'm going to cultivate my own spores and I'm going to grow it myself. And creating a beautiful space for them. Creating a beautiful space for yourself. Finding an environment that supports that entire process will naturally lead you.
It's so much better to do it in nature and than in a disco or
oh god
or within 4 walls,
Right.
Yeah.
I can't even. I don't even know. And there's people doing it. I go to the music festival. I went to the party. I did this thing, and a lot of times I have to work with people after that too, because they blow open a door, and they can't. We've heard of the bad trip. Ultimately, I don't think there's anything bad about those trips. Again, mind-inducing or God-revealing. What we're seeing is our own psyche, our own consciousness, and there's aspects of our own reality of ourselves that we can't handle. And it can be very jarring to look at yourself in the mirror for the first time.
I always remember I sent you once a Muslim patient of mine. And when that person had a mushroom experience, what she said was, I've been studying the Quran and revering the Quran for 60 years, and tonight I actually saw what the Quran talks about and experienced it myself.
And she said, for the first time in my life, I've experienced God.
Yeah.
I've experienced spirit.
That was incredible, no? And that kind of mystical experience is not to be diminished. It's really something that can change lives. A part of which is your wellness and your health and your blood pressure and your cholesterol and your risk of dementia and the whole functioning of your body, every system, every organ, because every cell in our bodies have a mind. In fact, our mind is the totality of the minds of every particle in our body, right? So everything is in communication, immediate, instantaneous, from the tip of your head to the tip of your toe.
Yeah.
And when somebody gains insight in such a profound way, the effect on the physiology, on the biology, on the physical body is undeniable. And it's being proven now.
It's being proven now.
By double-blind placebo studies, peer-reviewed, if they were necessary.
We are talking about relationships. The universe is an endless reaching out of bonding and relationships. This is what atoms do. It's just what life does. And most people have no relationship to their own cells, to their own gut, to their own mind. They're like, I'm afraid of hallucinogens or psychedelics because, and people say this to me, I would never do that because I don't want to see what's in my mind. If you can't have a relationship with your own consciousness, how are you going to have a relationship with your own cells? And if you don't have a relationship with your own cells, this is why we have 55% of America that is chronically ill.
Yeah, you call yourself a medicine man. I call myself a medicine man because even though I studied medicine in medical school and I was trained in understanding each part, then afterwards I reorganized my thinking through functional medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, and other ancient schools of medicine and healing. And what I do now is more like creating the conditions for your own healer, for your own nature to do what it knows what to do, and it's just not achieving it, mainly for two reasons. Something is lacking or something is blocking. When you remove the obstacles and you provide whatever is lacking, everything corrects by itself.
And this is a psychological and emotional state. And I think, because I remember asking you back in the day, when I left film, and I was like, should I go to med school? Can I go be a doctor? And you said no. You and Dr. James were both like, no, keep doing what you're doing. Keep going to the jungle. That's going to be more valuable to this. And so now, how many years later, this relationship is now built. At the time, it was still very separate. Like what I was doing, going down to the jungles, was like still super weird and not really common. And now it's this synthesis and this relationship that we've built, and your journey back to this understanding, and me spending so much time with the medicine people, with the traditional medicine people, and learning about everything that they said, and then everything that they said in metaphor and story, like you spoke about in the Upanishads. Then you find out in quantum physics, thousands of years later, that it's now fact. I've found the same with all these things that the medicine men say. There are exact provings in what cells do and how the biochemistry actually works and what these medicines do. So I'm very grateful that I spent my time mostly in the dirt and in the profoundly deep psychology of internal relationship, building internal relationship to these medicines and building this larger view of ourselves, right? We talk about microdosing and macrodosing. We talk about the microcosm, we talk about the macrocosm. In the same way, we're the intelligence of the planet. As our intelligence and as our consciousness grows to care for it more, to care for our bodies more, to care for our relationships more, to care for what we consume, what we put in, the blockages that we remove, we are providing a new phase state so that the planet won't have to endure seas of blockages, plastics, and the death of our oceans, and this is what I very strongly believe that all of these medicines are asking us to do.
Beautifully said. Thank you for watching.
Hi, welcome to the addendum for the Doctor and Shaman on Psilocybin, with conversation between Dr. Younger and Raven Cruz. And I had a question for you. If you are in a place that you might be able to have access to microdoses, what are the things that some of us should be looking for if we have no idea how to begin? like what quality, what is the dosing, like how often, and different things like that.
Great, it's a really good question. And so if you happen to be a place, and by access, I'm sure you mean legality, because it is still illegal in the United States, and there are some countries where it is, and there are some cities that are starting to vote into legal use of it. There are clinicians and people that are practicing and helping people through it. So if people happen to be around one of those environments, there are a couple things you want to look for. One, you want to make sure that the grower and the growing quality of where the mushroom is produced is not only in what we call a non-contaminatable environment, because once the spores start to produce, they can cross-contaminate very easily and create mold, and other things can be in there. So you want to make sure that your grower has a good handle on the quality that they're producing. Like with your meat or your chicken or your fish, you want to know where it's coming from. So I try to buy my meat from farms that have open farm policy. So you should really try to think about finding the kind of people that are cultivating these, or if you find a clinician, that they're cultivating a relationship with whoever's growing for them. Same with the way we should treat our food. So you want, preferably the mushrooms that are grown and cultivated and harvested regularly and dried, and then a microdose usually comes in a capsule, in which then you measure out per capsule the exact amount. Now I've seen people work with, on the smaller end, 0.04 all the way up to 0.2 as a microdose. Now the 0.2, that's like the Silicon Valley heavy hitters, the guys who like to take and focus and get their kind of transmission on, people who are really working with heavy duty emotional or physical challenges. If I take a 0.2, I'm on the couch crying for several hours. Right. So that's not, and I know you've had that experience as well. Whereas I feel very comfortable taking a 0.06. So that's again 0.06 grams, which would be 60 milligrams. So what do you feel comfortable taking? What in your experience?
I'm about the 0.04.
0.04.
And then anything higher.
Anything higher that, yeah. And I like the 0.04. Now you're getting the same neurological kind of effect. Chemically, you might have a different emotional or psychological effect. So I've seen them divided in 0.04, 0.06, 0.08. I know that 0.08 is a very common amount. A lot of people like that. And again, this is depending on the strength and the quality of the medicine that you're getting. Because if you're getting a weaker quality, you might need 0.2 and not feel that much. I know that when I do acquire the medicine from peoples that grow it and cultivate it in places where it's legal, and when I use it there, that it's very high quality, so I have to take the smaller amount. 0.06 works very well for me. Some people do 0.1, 0.12, up to 0.2. It's recommended that you do it about 5 times a week, up to 5. No more than 5, so that your body's serotonin receptors can rest and your body can kind of like modulate itself. Could be 3 times a week, could be 2. Could be 4, could be 2 days on, 2 days off, 2 days on, and then 1 day. It really depends on your rhythm and your schedule. A lot of people like to take them in the morning with their first meal or with their first nourishment. It can be on an empty stomach, or it can be not. Some people like to take them in the evening. Some people like to take them in the afternoon. I know people who have a very high energy output, and when they have that, they feel like the mushrooms make them sleepy because it's kind of helping them. And I know people who have a low energy output and they feel like it speeds them up. So depending on where you are, I suggest you're building an internal relationship with this medicine. It's not just a pill like a pharmaceutical. Do this, do this, do this. You're actually building a relationship with not only a very specific kingdom in nature, but a spirit. Right. And so you want to develop your own relationship with that, because it's unlocking your own ability to doctor yourself. So max 5 times a week. Now, if you happen to be around somebody who actually knows what they're doing, and you have a what we were calling the stack or the Stamets protocol, we found that the combination of lion's mane, of psilocybin, of niacin, creates a giant synergistic effect to allow the body to produce a lot more neurons than normal. We lose so many a day. We lose about 100,000 if you're like on point and healthy. If you live in New York City and LA and have a lot of stress, if you're dealing with cancer or stress or anything that's challenging your body, you could be losing up to 400,000 a day. And we only make 700 new ones a day until we're 50. So you're 28,
Yeah.
right? So you've got some time to keep building up neurons. Once we're 50, we need that help more so than when we're younger, but it's still good you can never have too many neurons. Memory is something that we lose in our old age because we start to deteriorate. The hippocampus no longer makes neurons. This helps stimulate nerve growth factor. So people ask me, how long should I take them? I say keep taking them. You can't have too much support in this way. Once you build a relationship, if it's beneficial, it can. And it's not the kind of thing that if you stop, you're going to get depressed or it's going to drop you off. Have you had that experience?
No, not really.
Yeah, you just kind of go back to default mode network. It doesn't cause drainage. It's just support, and now you're supported here, and then you want some more support, and then you're supported there. So that the only thing you might feel might be the effects of the niacin. You might get a little tingly, blood flush, itchy.
I kind of like it.
Yeah, some people are like, oh my God, I'm having an allergic reaction. And it's like, no, it's just the niacin kind of opening up the capillaries. And by the way, if you have a strong niacin reaction, it's telling us you're low on B3s. So once people start taking them, their body stabilizes, they get a B3 supplement, they stop having the flushes. That's the way I highly recommend taking them. And that stack with that protocol, there are other things that you can add to that to support that, different mushrooms, cacao, blueberry, bacopa, different supplements that are supportive to the brain. If you happen to be around a medicine person or a medicine carrier or a clinician who's been doing the research, there's a lot of beautiful possibilities in the combination that you can get in your daily support to help with any number of things. So there was a little support for you guys, so that if you come across a situation where you might find these, or whatever country you're in, again, please always check with local laws and see what's legal and what's not legal. Some states have passed laws where it's legal to have the medicine itself and use it, and it still might be federally illegal, which is the same with marijuana. Right. It's still federally not legal, but it's legal in some states to have it, which is very confusing. But do your best, use your best judgment, make sure that the people that you're working with you trust, and you know someone that they trust and they come recommended, to make sure that you get the highest quality benefit, because it's not, again, you're having your humanism affected by this incredible species, by this incredible kingdom. And it's something you don't want to toy with. You want to be very sure about and have support from experts that know what they're doing. So may this be of beneficial help to all of you out there. Thank you, Dr. Younger. And if you have any questions, I'm sure you can forward them on to him. Thank you for reminding us after watching the video that we didn't talk about that, even though we promised to. So
here it is.
There it is. So thank you, Sophia. That's my sister. So thank you for watching.